Welcome to another Papirfly webinar. Today we are talking to a company that I think you all know, PepsiCo, and we are here to focus on their innovative approach to employer branding. My name is Espen. I'm the Chief Branding Officer at the Papirfly. And with me today, I have Sally Elbassir. Sally is the Associate Manager of Global Talent Attraction and Engagement at PepsiCo. And hopefully, Sally, you'll be sharing some of the secret sauce that the PepsiCo has in terms of being so successful in employer branding. Hopefully, at least for me, we'll also discuss a little bit about Paperfly's platform and how we help out during the process. Particularly, we'll talk a little bit about solving the challenges around brand creation across different languages and also then regions. That's the goal, at least. You want to jump straight in? Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm glad to have you with me. Um, let's begin at the beginning. You guys did a big brand refresh recently.
We
What
did.
drove this decision? Why
Yes.
a brand refresh?
Yeah, so, I think it is, at the end of the day, I think that it's super important for your employer brand to be this like iterative thing. It's something that is supposed to reflect the company internally and also supposed to reflect, the talent market as it is. And in the last few years, there's been so many changes about from talent regarding expectations from a company. And then also on our end, we really wanted to ensure that we were reflecting our priorities, right? So I think at PepsiCo, we have really shifted towards being focused on our Pep Positive initiative, which is doing good for people, for the planet, and for communities. And so I think we just wanted to ensure the employer brand was really showcasing that and helping us attract talent who feels the same.
It turned out great. And I think this is a very typical thing that we see where, the process is supposed to be like this because people change, the world changes, brands needs to change as well. That's just how it is. And good brands are always adapting to external factors. This time around, you guys did something that is kind of new. You included the consumer brand into the company PepsiCo brand. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this is really actually the first time we've kind
Mm.
of significantly incorporated our consumer portfolio into our employer brand. We did this by including the products themselves into our visual identity. And then we also included a lot of references in our copy as well. And I think a lot of people don't know just how broad our portfolio is. There are so many brands within the PepsiCo portfolio, and that's a huge draw for talent. And so we really just wanted to ensure that it's kind of part of our story, right? We wanted to connect associates and future associates, right, with the work that they're going to be doing every day, whether they are directly touching the brand by making, moving, and selling our product, or whether they're doing it indirectly, like with employer branding, for example.
I can just imagine how many people kind of work on or I guess touch your brands every day, right? Which is I mean, so many. The process in general, I mean, being so big, this is obviously a huge project, probably a lot of stakeholders to manage as well. You wanna just tell us a little bit more about the process in general?
Yeah,
What was
so
important? What was kind of what was the key success factors here?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the process of building a new employer brand is quite a it's quite a large project, right? It's not just large. So in a few ways, I think it's large in the sense that you really want to ensure that your employer brand is reflective of the company. Um, Everyone wants to showcase that their employer brand or that their company is a great place to work through their employer brand. But I think one of the unique things about PepsiCo is that you have this opportunity to, you have these ambitious people, but you also have this like very nurturing learning environment. And so I think that's really what makes it so unique, is that you go in, it is like a company where you learn a lot, you have these great places that people that you work with, you get that mentorship, and you can really go far in your career. And so I think when it came to developing the employer brand, there was obviously making sure that we're showcasing that aspect of it. But then also from the kind of more administrative side, it was, what are the challenges of, like, it's the challenges of really having so many stakeholders across a large and decentralized company that you want sort of that like support and buy-in from. So I think for us, it was really important to make sure we were bringing all of our different stakeholders along for the journey as we developed the visual identity, the copy, the tone of voice, like all the aspects that make up an employer brand. And ensuring that stakeholders were excited about the brand and proud of it and wanted to use it eventually, you know, when it went live. So yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a healthy process, I think. And typically in these processes, you, like you said, you want to bring stakeholders into the process to collaborate. And it might mean that the process is a little bit slower, but the end result typically is always better. You wanna share how Paperfly was included into the strategies and the process, and when kind of we came along?
Yeah, so I think, you know, Paperfly was interesting because it actually played a critical part in helping us bring our visual identity to life. So I think, you know, originally when we were sort of looking into Paperfly, we thought it was very much going to be like a tool that we activated after the brand went live. But the
And
reality
we get this a lot.
Oh yeah, exactly. I think like, you know, you think, oh, this is a tool for just activation. But actually, I think like when we came to start developing the visual identity part of it, what we found was we needed to be super tight and super clear on what the rules are, what is the system for this visual identity, when are people allowed to use, you know, we have a variety of aspects of our brand, like we have silhouette cutouts with wallpapers, we have these bursts with kind of professional and UGC photography. So we had to be super clear about the color systems and the amount of bursts that you could use and all that stuff. And it was also, you know, it was a surprising challenge. I think that was actually one of the biggest challenges that we had with our employer brand, to be, you know, totally transparent with you, is that coming up with these rules and systems that we understood inside out, that designers understood inside out, so that we could bring them to Paperfly, and then also make sure that we were communicating them to all of the associates that would be using our employer brand. Like, yeah, it was a lot. So I think, you know, Paperfly played an early role in our employer brand transformation strategy, and then also, of course, a later role in terms of activation.
That's great. Love to hear that. I mean, we're happy to be part of this project as well. I guess it's always difficult, right? Trying to figure out how much wiggle room you can give people using the brand. Is sort of like making sure people can be creative inside the limits and inside the system, which is always a challenge. And if I remember correctly, you guys came to us at least partly because you wanted some help. I guess streamlining these processes around the creation of brand material. Could you maybe share a little bit about how these processes look? I mean, they go across different countries, regions, different languages. This is kind of a big deal for you guys. How is this today?
Yeah, it's huge because this is really, I mean, Paperfly has just been this like like honestly pivotal tool for us, because
Yes.
the way we worked historically has been, we've had, every market or every region works with different agencies, or sometimes they have internal partners that create the visual assets for their region, market,
Yep.
etc. And so what we found is that it was just so challenging to maintain brand consistency. All it takes is like a little tweak here and a little tweak there, and then suddenly your brand doesn't look like your brand anymore. And then I think budget also played a role, right? Like every market has a different marketing budget that they can allocate. And so with Paperfly, one of the cool things is like it's a tool that everyone feels empowered to use. We made sure that we set it up in a way that folks could really take the templates and then use it to build assets that are still a little bit customized, like they have a bunch of options when it comes to shapes and colors and such, but also is still maintaining that global brand, right? And it's been great. And I think also just from a headline perspective and copy as well, like we have all of these sort of preset headlines that that the global teams kind of came up with. And the translation tool within Paperfly has been, amazing, because we partnered with all of our local comms and employer brand teams to ensure that the headlines were translated and reflective and localized to markets, so that we're still having kind of that global messaging consistency, but all the way down to the local level. So it's been great.
Yeah, this is the translation tool, I guess, that you're talking about, right? Which helps bring this into different languages and different regions, and as part of the templates. I've asked you this before, but you guys recruit because you mainly recruit in, well, always English, but also then local languages, right? And there's quite a few.
Yes, there's
Too many to be counted.
Yeah, too many to be counted, definitely. I mean, I think we're, PepsiCo products are in every region around the world, and we have offices in all of those regions. And so you find that I think it's in some countries, English is the kind of predominant working language. In others, it's not. And so it's really important for us that the assets and templates that we create can be utilized by recruiters, no matter what the language is, no matter what the market or position that they're recruiting for is. And yeah.
Yeah, typically in these, so you have languages, you have regions, and then you have these work streams that go both externally and internally. This is kind of where the complexity comes from, right? And I guess this is a perfect use case for Paperfly as well. Do you want to share a little bit about how kind of the process, how is it different now compared to how it used to be, like in terms of efficiency, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, I think historically, I mentioned earlier that we all had agency partners, and those agency partners, we don't have one global agency. Every market, every region has their own. And so you have to go to the agency for everything, right? Most of us don't have the design know-how to create complicated marketing assets for our teams. Some of us don't have budget, etc. And so what's been really great now is that there's so many different kinds of assets that we've created in Paperfly that people can just take them and make them their own. And they not only are saving money by not always having to go to the agency to create, for example, a social media post, but also I think it's reducing a lot of the time it takes to produce assets as well, because ultimately when you work with an external partner, it does take them some time to put an asset together. And so it's been really great. And then I think secondarily, when we are still working with agencies, whether that's for maybe assets that are a little bit more complicated or whatever the case may be, they can go in and use Paperfly, not just to kind of see what the brand looks like in real life, if you will, with the rules and structure around it. But they're also able to access our DAM. And so all the pre-approved photography is in there, which again, that was something we didn't really have before. So having the DAM in there with photography from all those different regions has been such a game changer for us, to ensure that you have variety. You also have representation globally of different associates from around the world. So it's been amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's empowerment, I guess, right, of everyone in your organization, and I guess partners as well, which is what we aim for.
Yeah.
Leaving the technical stuff behind, your goal at the end of the day, you want to attract, you want to retain talent. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how PepsiCo is a little different here compared to others and competitors?
Yeah. So I think, PepsiCo is like such a great organization, I think, in that you have it's such a human company, I think, or the people that are in it, especially, like there's so much kindness, there's so much willingness to teach others. There is a lot of mentorship, whether that's formal or informal. And I think that there's so much opportunity here at PepsiCo to learn, to grow your career, to change your career too. I think there's so many associates in here that have moved teams or moved roles. And so I think for us, it was just so important that our employer brand really reflected that, not just like the people that we have currently that are like great leaders and people that care about, the community, that care about the planet, but also that we're attracting the talent that feels the same and would be a great fit for the organization.
Yeah, that's good to hear. PepsiCo is an awesome company, and I think we see this with a lot of companies now, where companies try to truly showcase who they are, right, and maybe differentiate a little bit as well. And typically, at least like for visual identities, me coming from a design background, it's always been a little bit visuals first, a little bit identity first. While now it seems that brands are moving towards like being more having more personality, showcasing who you really are as a brand, which I think is awesome, and I'm guessing also helps a lot when it comes to recruiting, which is your goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we focus a lot on storytelling too. That's part of sort of our content strategy is
Yeah, that is part of brand.
Yeah. And I
Definitely.
think it's a great way for us to really showcase like deeper stories beyond maybe short social media snippets or like really cool visuals, which are of course an important aspect of brand marketing, but also I think again, getting down to that human connection is something that people are finding more and more important when they're looking for a company and how they would fit in with
Yeah.
the company.
I agree. We see the same thing. People want to work somewhere where they feel like they fit in, where the company fits their personality and their beliefs and their kind of whole world as well. It's a two-way street. Great. Before we head over to the questions, Sally, any last advice for other companies listening in terms of employer branding strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say that like one really important aspect is to just ensure that you're bringing your stakeholders along for the entire journey. I know that it does make it feel like it does slow the process down a little bit. But I think at the end of the day, it really helps you create an employer brand that not only addresses the challenges of a variety of stakeholders, but also stakeholders then feel proud and excited to use the brand. And I think at the end of the day, that's something that's so important is you're having associates that feel like a brand is reflective of the company that they're working in and of them as a member of this company, right? And then also leadership that is excited to use the brand as well. And then I think the other aspect that I feel like we did well is also meeting, I guess, people where they're at with the brand. And so what that means is, the employer brand is for everyone. It's not just for the employer brand marketing team. It's for talent acquisition. It's for comms. It's internal and external. And I think for us, it's showcasing all the different ways and creating assets and workshops and teaching people all the different ways that the brand can be utilized within their own day-to-day jobs. And then also, again, it boils down to making sure that you're creating a brand that people feel like is reflective of them, because if you do that, then they are going to be more inclined to utilize it and be excited about it. So I'd say that's probably my biggest thing.
That's great advice. And like you said, yeah, you want people to use the brand. You want people to actually take the brand elements and use the options they have. And this is also how the brand grows, right?
Yeah.
When it gets into the hands of everyone who's actually supposed to use it on a everyday basis or a weekly basis. That's the exciting part, I think, of branding in general. Okay, so. Let's move over to some questions now. Maybe we should give people a couple seconds to type in case someone has a question that they haven't typed in yet. If so, now is your chance. And we're happy to address probably any questions that you might have.
Yep.
Okay, what do we have here? Let's have a look. Okay, this is a good one. So Marta's asking, with such a complex process, Ali, and so many stakeholders included, how long did it take to develop the new employer branding proposition? And also, do you think you could have done anything better to improve, or I guess also speed up the process?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because we sort of started and stopped the process a little bit in the earlier stages before moving forward. So I would say in total, it probably took us around 18 months.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we started, we stopped, we switched agencies at one point. And so there was just a little bit, it wasn't a smooth, continuous process for us. I do think that part of it is just the challenge of making sure that you're creating this employer brand that really encompasses you. So there's a lot of research that's done, in terms of focus groups and generally just market research of the talent market and understanding what talent is looking for and how does that align with the initiatives of the company. So in terms of how to speed up the process, to be honest, I do think that just given the size of PepsiCo, I don't know that we could have sped up the process any more than we did. I think the only thing that would have done that would have been just working on it more continuously rather than sort of starting and stopping. So we had some of those hiccups along the way.
Can I ask, when you started the project, was there a timeline in place somehow? I mean, these projects are typically not linear, right? You delve in and then you get some information, do some research, and then the more data you have, the more data you want to see, and then you start working with creatives, and that typically also takes a while. And was it like, did you think that it was going to take 18 months, or was it more of a no?
No, I don't think we didn't really have like a super set deadline in place. It wasn't like, oh, we started this June 1st and it has to be done, let's say, at the end of the year or in a year's time. But as we got closer to the end, that was when we really had that deadline in place. So and that deadline came in conjunction with wanting to announce it during our town hall for all of talent acquisition.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Any more questions? Okay, we have a question from Julie here as well. Is your brand on a different platform than the employer branding platform? I mean, I guess this is the corporate branding, right? And if yes, is it also managed by Paperfly? Your employer branding is with Paperfly, but we do not help you with the corporate brand, do we?
Correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
our corporate brand is actually on a different platform. It's not managed by our team at all. It's actually primarily managed by the communications team.
Yeah.
We do have like an internal DAM, and it's interesting because our corporate brand is also tied a little bit with our product portfolio. And so we do have a separate DAM that encompasses all the marketing materials and everything related to that, that includes
Yeah.
both the corporate brand and the consumer brands.
I can also say that we see this a lot in Paperfly, where the product that we provide to employer branding from a technical point of view is typically quite similar to what we provide for corporate branding, but the content is typically quite different. So you would have kind of the same build-up, you would have the same user interface and UX, but you would have vastly different content in there, which is typically the case at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think that, I mean, there's different audiences for both, right? And I think like for us, it's nice to have it separate, because then, you know, if you're in talent acquisition, if you're in comms, or if you're in someone that uses the employer brand much more frequently, you go in and you know you have sort of an already filtered group of templates and photos and etc.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, like you said, it's a different use case typically,
Yeah.
used for different purposes. So I guess it makes sense. A different question here from Marta again. Okay, this is good. We talked kind of about the initial reasoning behind launching a project like this, and we talked about the process, some learnings from the process. What are the next steps for your employer brand strategy? What's next to come?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things that we are focusing on is expanding our internal communications platform. So and deployment internally as well. I do think that there is quite a broad understanding of the employer brand, but because PepsiCo is so large and we have so many markets, and different markets have different levels of budget, of capability, of just in terms of even teams, like some have much larger employer brand teams than others. And so for us, it's going to be focusing a lot more on training and expansion, so we can ensure that every group, talent acquisition, comms, you know, A&E, all understand the ins and outs of the employer brand and then are able to localize it and utilize it in their markets and
Yeah,
functions.
because even though it's launched, it still takes some time to kind of implement and get the full efficiency out of it typically.
Absolutely.
That's quite typical. Lorraine asks, how has Paperfly helped in terms of return on investment for implementing employer brand? And can you share some examples?
Yeah, so I believe I mentioned this earlier, but historically how we've worked is that every single market has an agency partner. So we don't have necessarily in-house designers or people that can kind of help us create assets and templates for various employer brand needs. And so I know my team from the global side and also every market has to work directly with an agency to create all those assets. Now, since we've implemented Paperfly, I think that has reduced that cost significantly, because we have quite a few templates that can now be built within the platform themselves, and we don't need a designer, we don't need to partner with an external agency as often. Obviously, there are cases we don't have every template that could potentially ever be used. So for example, print, we don't have a lot of the print stuff in the Paperfly platform. So sometimes you still have to partner with an agency for that. But I do think it's definitely reduced the agency spend and time.
Bringing the brand home, I guess.
Exactly.
But then this is a good this is a good example, I think, as well, because then you go to the agency for the something special, typically, right? The something maybe like even a smaller agency for something niche that they're super good at, or something with a high kind of speciality.
Exactly.
While I don't want to say run of the mill kind of content, but more of the normal kind of material can be done in house.
Absolutely.
We keep getting questions, so that's great.
That's great.
Upcoming initiatives kind of answered this, I feel like. Jeff, I do not think we will be looking at the PepsiCo platform. I'm not sure we're even allowed to be honest. Okay, from Kirsten here. How are you activating your EVP internally, and how about the employer brand or the visual identity?
Yeah, so in terms of internal activation, I think we're approaching it in several different ways. So depending, I think what we're really focusing on right now is developing sort of custom trainings for different functions and different regions. So we've done a lot of training for our sector leads. So those are people that are running the employer brand regionally in Europe, in Asia, et cetera. And so now what we want to do is also tackle the markets and ensure that the markets are understanding on a deep level how they can use the employer brand, how they can localize the employer brand without going off brand. And so, for example, one of the aspects of our brand that we're using is we do have these product wallpapers, and they're used as part of our visual identity, and they display different products from our portfolio. So we're working with the markets to create these more localized ones. So that include a mix of both global brands like Pepsi, like Lay's, but also include, local snacks and drinks that maybe aren't more globally known. Yeah. And then I think additionally, we also have some fun activation ideas that we want to do internally, like we want to do a little employer brand day within within talent acquisition. And so people can come in, learn about different ways they can use advocacy, for example, with the employer brand, ask us questions. How can they use Papirfly in their day-to-day? So we definitely have quite a few plans lined up in terms of activating internally.
That's great. Launching a brand like this it doesn't stop on launch date.
Definitely not. I think it's always going to be an ongoing learning process. We're planning on developing education courses as well for just employer branding in general and on our employer brand. So I think we definitely have a long way to go, but I'm also really happy with the progress that we've made so far.
That's great to hear. Just trying to keep an eye on the questions here as well. Where are we now? Okay. From Dominic, employer brand and corporate brand are often kept very separate during evolution projects like this. Do you feel that we are starting to see more alignment and collaboration of the two during these projects? You touched briefly on this earlier.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
So unfortunately not. I think that when, I think I mentioned a little bit of that slowdown and starting and stopping earlier. And I think part of it was due to in the hopes that we would be collaborating a little bit more with our corporate brand team so that we could make sure the employer brand was also reflective of that. And, that there were maybe overlaps with visual identity, et cetera. However, that just hasn't been the case. And I think what we realized is that there was a much more dire need for launching an employer brand as soon as we could to ensure that we were reflecting the market, that we were getting talent that really aligns with PepsiCo. And so in this scenario, there has not, despite the desire.
It would be ideal, I guess.
Definitely.
At least sometimes for the process as well, since they do overlap. I think at the end of the day, if you manage, depending on the size, if you manage to do something like that, I think that would be ideal. At the same time, given that it's both projects kind of have different goals, like we touched on earlier. It's at least for bigger companies, it tends to be a little bit problematic and more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we keep getting questions here, so that's great. We still have time, I think. Yeah. From Rita, does your team create assets for the team to just edit and use? Sometimes people on a team or hiring manager do not want to start from scratch or don't have the creative brain to execute on that.
Yeah.
You want to tell us how this works in Pepsi now?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have a set number of assets that we know are used all the time that don't necessarily need to be edited so frequently. So one example for that is new joiner templates, right? So if we've hired someone new into the team, we would hope that the recruiter could use these templates that say, I'm joining PepsiCo, or they also have the opportunity to add in their like photo and say, I'm starting a new role, I'm excited, etc. So I think for those ones, you kind of have this sort of set template. So we've created like 3 or 4 different varieties that you can give to a candidate and they can utilize it. We also have certain things such as, PowerPoints. We have, for example, email headers, certain things where all you have to do is just put in your copy for the email header, for example, rather than having to create it from scratch. But yeah, that is a very much set number. We don't actively create assets all the time for talent acquisition or for comms necessarily.
Yeah, and I guess the more the better typically, right? With some leeway, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the cool things about Paperfly too is that you can always see what assets are being created in your region, or in your market. And so if you see, for example, in the US, if I see that someone created an asset that I really like, I can always take it, make a copy, tweak it if I need to, and then just use that. So
yeah, duplicate it basically.
Exactly.
There's some questions here about how often you refresh your brand, and also joining 2 questions together here. How do you evaluate which aspects of your brand that needs to be refreshed? When was the last time Pepsi or
Brand
PepsiCo did
refresh.
because I remember a few.
Yeah, so I have been at the company for 4 years, and so we've only had the brand before that since I've been at the company. So I would say it depends. I don't have the exact answer in terms of number of years, but I do know that our team and my manager, especially, who leads all of employer branding, like, we very firmly believe that the employer brand it's like this iterative process, right?
Yes.
You constantly need to make sure the talent market changes so quickly, and the desire of talent and the availability, and even as a company, I think our priorities also change. So I do think that you always need to kind of constantly evaluate it and see if it's still resonating with folks. And I would say that I know with PepsiCo, it's like we don't do those big overhauls as frequently, but I do know that you're always tweaking little items such as copy and things like that to make sure that it is sort of up to date with our goals.
Yeah, and that is typically the correct way to do it as well, I think. Rather have something more iterative where it changes with new people, like we discussed, or new maybe goals, and rather have something more organic. That being said, typically for a company, a major brand refresh is done when there's new strategies maybe that should be executed on, and typically if it's a repositioning or if it's someone needed to figure out how to reach a certain part of the market that they haven't reached yet, then typically a brand refresh or a rebranding comes in. Some companies do it every like 2.5, 3 years. Some people wait 10. Some people haven't done it in 50 years. It all depends on the, I guess, what you get out of the brand you have. There's no right or wrong, I think.
Yeah.
Do we have time for a couple more? Do you still have time, Sally?
Yes, I do.
Great. So from Lorraine, does PepsiCo have a dedicated team focusing on DAM or Paperfly or content management in general? Do you have an approval process for creatives on Paperfly? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that we necessarily have a dedicated team. What we did when we first launched Paperfly, and really just for a really long period, probably the whole first year that we had Paperfly, we had a dedicated team that was sort of our Paperfly expertise team. And so what we did is everyone had a different aspect. And one of those, we had someone that was doing, for example, all the education and trainings. We had someone that was doing user management. And we did also have one person that was focused on the DAM content management piece. So that's sort of how we kind of historically have done it. I think right now in terms of next steps, we are still trying to figure out what is finding that sweet spot between having people can upload their photo shoots that they do in their markets and other creative assets while still making sure that we're happy with that content. And so we still haven't quite figured out the exact process for that. And then in terms, but in terms of the approval process, we don't have we have a selective, I would say, approval process for creators.
A facilitator.
So, yeah, exactly. Like there's some assets, for example, the ones that all go on social media, they do have to go into an approval process through our social media scheduler. And so for those, you don't have to necessarily get approval in Paperfly, since we know you're going to get approval when you're posting it to Instagram or to LinkedIn. But for some of the assets that we know don't necessarily have that third approval process, those ones do have a approval. So it's videos, it's print, it's programmatic media ads, all that stuff does have an approval process on it.
Yeah, this is kind of where I guess Paperfly also steps into almost like brand compliance in a sense, right? And there's, I see Jeff has sort of the same question here, and there's two ways to look at this, Jeff. The one way of doing compliance is kind of making sure that you can't create anything off brand, and the other part is making sure that an asset or some material is actually on brand after the fact. And I guess we have solutions for both. At least somewhat in Paperfly. That seems to be the questions we have here, Sally. I think with that, 45 minutes in, we can wrap it up as well. I guess what's left is to say thank you for joining to everyone. It's been a pleasure hosting this. Of course, a big thank you to you as well, Sally, for spending this time with us. Appreciate the conversations we've had, over the learnings that you've given us. Hopefully we'll be back with a new webinar soon. In the meantime, if you have any questions for us in Paperfly, at least you can always reach out to our trusted guy Derek. His email is derek@paperfly.com, and he'll help you out. I guess with that we're logging off. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.